This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world of entertainment, politics, health, breakthroughs in technology, science and research, and we take a look at these things from a higher perspective. What do I mean by a higher perspective? I mean from a point of view which takes a look at things as they are in relation to the stories we are telling about ourselves. It's kind of like looking at what's going on outside of you as a projection of what is within you. It's kind of like looking at or being involved in a hologram, interacting with it, getting engaged with it, feeling stimulated by it, perhaps even learning from it, and yet also recognizing that it is ultimately illusion, that it is ultimately a hologram that you have created. So, the guiding thought behind that is that we human beings are two. We are the people that, interact with one another on a day-to-day sort of mundane, and I don't mean boring by mundane, but just the regular routine of everyday life, and all the struggles that it involves, everything from health to education to raising a family or finding the job that you want, all of those things. We exist on one level, but we also exist at a higher level. And that is a level that we may or may not be, or may start to become more consciously aware of at the other level of our existence. But we often are not aware of that. And we certainly aren't fully aware of it to the degree where we completely understand this higher level of ourselves. And this higher level of ourselves, and over centuries, has been thought about and reflected upon by philosophers and metaphysicians and mystics through the ages. But the idea, in its roughest form, is that what we think of, or what we've called God, is basically our higher selves, which we have projected outward into, if you happen to believe in a sort of personal God, into some sort of form, whether it's the Christian God or whether it's Allah or whatever it may be, or a pantheon of gods. There may be different aspects of the higher part of you. And that's what we're doing, because perhaps that highest level of ourselves is too much for us to accept within, and so we have to turn it without. And that may be the impetus behind the creation of religions and worship and all of that kind of thing. It's an interesting thing to talk about. It's an interesting philosophy to think about, but in just practice, to be aware of that. However you may rationalize it in terms that you can understand, the sense of it, the feel of it, the inner knowledge of it is, well, it's unassailable. It just is. And those who have felt it, I think, understand what I'm talking about. Those who have not may not. But I believe it to be truth, And so when we are confronted with these stories in our lives that we've created, and they come through us to us in many different ways. They come through the actors in our lives, friends, family, co-workers. They come through the television, through the news reports, through the internets. But they are all equally powerful in the sense that you can use them as tools to expand yourself and your awareness of that higher element of you. You can take anything that brings discomfort to you or uncertainty to you, and you can bring it within, and you can recognize the truth of it and recognize the truth of yourself and your oneness, and you can take energy away from any situation that causes you that discomfort. You can also take a look at situations that cause you joy and go into those and appreciate those and appreciate everything that you have created. Because it is good. Okay, enough said on that topic for now. We're going to talk about some scary things. Yep, it's October. It's Halloween month, and we've already got scary things on the horizon. We're going to talk about Ebola, boo, and terrorist plots by ISIL, boo, and we're going to talk about the Secret Service that can't seem to protect the president. Boo! Scared yet? These things are kind of certainly scary. Certainly the Ebola outbreak, which we talked about a bit last week, in the sense that these situations start to really help, I think, in a very practical way for people and leaders and legislators and just the everyday person to understand how interconnected we are. That there is no distance between us. There really isn't. There's the illusion of distance, but there really isn't. And even the illusion of distance is more and more shall we say, porous because of our technology, because of our ability to be almost anywhere in one form or another, almost instantaneously. Even if we cannot travel physically somewhere instantaneously, we do so via the internet, through social media, through email. So it's very much a situation where we are more and more physically manifesting what we are on a higher spiritual level, if you will, which is the great degree of connectedness. And I spoke last week about the fact that, the belief that this Ebola virus that was breaking out in West Africa was a West African problem and not going to, affect us here, although we certainly have sympathy for those people and we certainly, wish them well and maybe send them a few bucks to help. But the idea still persisted that somehow this was not a situation that affected us in any real way. And then last week the president spoke rather stridently about the fact that more needed to be done about this Ebola outbreak on an international scale. And that sort of focused the attention. And now, this week, of course, as you probably know, Ebola has hit our world, if you will, through a man who flew in from Liberia to Texas, where he began to show symptoms a few days later, went to an emergency room where they didn't recognize it or didn't think about the fact that it might be Ebola, and let him go as if he had the flu. And he had to come back a few days later, during which time he had interactions with all kinds of people. So now the CDC is, of course, playing catch-up, trying to find all the people that he may or may not have come into contact with and keep an eye on them for, I believe it's 21 days is the incubation period for this disease. But the point here is that because of this persistence of the idea that somebody else's, or that this outbreak in some other part of the world didn't have a direct effect on others, the persistence of the idea that what happens in another part of the world isn't important and doesn't affect us is exactly what led to this Ebola outbreak getting out of control to the point that it is now. While discussions certainly amongst the leaders of world health have always been there, the practical necessities for taking care of such a thing have not been there. So you have places like Liberia and much of West Africa where they don't have access to the protective things that are needed. So it allows this virus to spread more quickly and more devastatingly. And when that's allowed to happen, it affects everyone. So there's a great article in the Washington Post about this today. And about how the slow realization among world leaders that this virus was getting out of control contributed to its further growth. Apparently, as of early September, there were 1,800 confirmed Ebola deaths in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. And by that time, there was still no coordinated global response. So we had to call in the military. We called in the military to West Africa. More will be coming. Health workers from Britain and China and Cuba. The Canadians and the Japanese are sending protective gear and labs. And now we have, non-profit organizations. Bill Gates Foundation is helping to contribute. But it may be a bit too late. It certainly is too late for a lot of West Africans. It is a crisis. It is a crisis. And now that it's here on our shores, everybody's aware of it. But how many people were really, maybe listening with half an ear to what was going on all last month and before that? this response had been so slow that the virus just could, run rampant. A lot of this was due to the fact that, the World Health Organization has had some budget problems and cuts. And so weren't able to maybe launch an effective response immediately. But even with the budget cuts, I think this kind of response, or the slowness of the response, had more to do with the thought behind it, which is the not realizing that this was an emergency of global importance. The not understanding how vulnerable people in places like Sierra Leone are to this kind of disease. And really the disgraceful fact that nobody has bothered to do anything to help protect countries like that are the most vulnerable. Because, it's them, not us, right? Yeah. So, this epidemic actually started in April. In April, it began to happen. I'm not sure if we actually even heard about it on the news until this summer. But it wasn't until August 8th, some 4.5 months later, that the World Health Organization declared a global emergency about this. And then there was all of this fear, we don't want to stop flights coming in and out because that will, impact our tourism dollar. Silly stuff like that. Really, silly stuff like that. People are dying, but we don't want to lose money over this. There had been, previous Ebola outbreaks that had been handled very quickly. And I think that experience maybe misled a lot of people into believing that it wasn't as important as it has turned out to be. As I said, these strategies are talked about in fighting diseases and, what ifs of bioterrorism and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that you have doctors and nurses, not enough of them, but the ones that you do have aren't protected. They don't have enough of the things they need, like medicines and gowns and latex gloves and fluids, or even enough workers to take care of and clean up and dispose of those who have passed. And so that is a situation that lends itself to the wide and quick spread of a disease of this nature. Of course, West Africa had a lot of problems. Poverty and civil war. And so these things tend to have an effect on first responders, on health workers. And a lot of the fear around the Ebola virus, without understanding how it works. also contributed, I think, because a lot of people were frightened that they would get exposed. And so made sure that they didn't go near the area. So now we know. And here we are. And now we begin to do something about it. And hope that it won't grow out of control. In other parts of the world, including here, and hope that where it is out of control, it can be contained. Okay. Enough said on that. Now I want to talk about something that's going on with the Pope in the Vatican. Over in the Vatican, they're having what they call a synod. A synod is basically an assembly of Roman Catholic bishops who are making decisions, governing decisions about how the church should be run. And of course the Pope is in charge of that, and he is attending the synod, where he is speaking with over 200 senior bishops, and the discussions are about the things that have been most controversial about the Catholic Church. Things like the position on abortion and contraception and homosexuality and divorce. Now, no one's expecting any immediate changes. The Catholic Church doesn't quite work that way. The Catholic Church moves very slowly. As one comedian said, that the Pope is apologizing now for things the Church did in the 12th century. That's the kind of timeline they're on. So these things take time, but the fact that attention is being paid to this now, and that this is a Pope that wants to move things along, it seems, may mean that it won't take 12 centuries to get these things taken care of. What he asked the bishops to do, or not to do, was to impose what he called intolerable moral burdens on believers. So that is an interesting statement for any pope to say. And this particular pope seems very determined to make some changes here. He launched a global survey that said that the majority of Catholics reject the church teachings on issues like sex and contraception. And he says that he hopes the bishops will respond to the epochal changes that families were living through. So they will debate these things for 2 weeks, and then in a year's time they will come back and talk about it again. But it seems like there's quite a movement to make some serious changes in the Catholic Church. All right, now we're going to come back now to this discussion that we've been having over the past couple of weeks. And this is about the enormous body of scientific research, well-crafted scientific research, that not only suggests, but, statistically shows that there is a what we call psi, or psychic ability, among people. Now, we've been talking about a recent study that was published in a very well-respected Journal of Psychology, in which the testing showed that in 9 experiments involving over 1,000 subjects, there was statistical evidence to prove the existence of something called retrocausation. Retrocausation is something that happens in the future that affects things in the past. And so they did studies with these students, such as rehearsing a list of words after testing for recall of those words. In other words, the students took a test to recall words they hadn't yet rehearsed, and then afterwards rehearsed those words. Things like that. So this study, which is published by a gentleman by the name of Darrell Byrne, who is one of the most prominent psychologists in the world, is starting to show that perhaps now the mainstream scientific community is starting to take these things a bit more seriously. So what's been occurring is that even though these tests have had significant results, there's great resistance to it, and great resistance to it because of the idea that somehow these are extraordinary claims, so they need to have extraordinary evidence. Whereas, a lot of testing for well-accepted scientific facts have effect sizes in these studies that are less than the studies and not as replicable as the ones that are done in the parapsychology field. So now this is a report from the University of California, Davis, and a study about replication and meta-analysis in parapsychology. And so in this report, this professor, her name is Jessica Utz, she's saying that as a field, parapsychology has been a source of controversy throughout its history. Strong beliefs tend to be resistant to change even in the face of data, and many people, scientists included, seem to have made up their minds on the question without examining any empirical data at all. A critic of parapsychology recently acknowledged that the level of the debate during the past 130 years has been an embarrassment for anyone who would like to believe that scholars and scientists adhere to standards of rationality and fair play. While much of the controversy has focused on poor experimental design and potential fraud, there have been attacks and defenses of these statistical methods as well, sometimes calling into question the very foundations of probability and statistical interference. Most of the criticisms have been leveled by psychologists. For example, a 1988 report of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences concluded that the committee finds no scientific justification from research conducted over a period of 130 years for the existence of parapsychological phenomena. But the fact of the matter is that these experiments have been replicated. They have been well crafted. They have shown statistical results, and that overall evidence indicates that there is an anomalous effect that is in need of explanation. But it also has to be understood that a phenomena such as this is clearly very different than trying to measure the health benefits of aspirin. It is different. And it probably has to do with the fact that it's got to be different for each person. Interesting stuff. It's a conversation we're going to continue to have on this show. But for now, it's time to wrap it up. So have a great week. Don't give in to those scary, scary boogaboos.